Oklahoma fans, college football fans, welcome into a very special and extremely special edition of Oklahoma at the Voice of College Football. This is Oklahoma Sooners Live, part of the Voice of College Football Network. Very excited, a very special time. Just take it in real quick, Oklahoma fans, because this is something that a lot of people are kind of teasing and poking fun at Oklahoma fans for being excited, but this is Oklahoma football. This is playoff time in Oklahoma. It's truly amazing. Tonight we're going to get into it, dive into it, preview the number 8 Oklahoma Sooners hosting number 9 Alabama Crimson Tide in the college football playoff first round game. I mean, there's just how many more times would this ever happen, especially with as much as Oklahoma, or not Oklahoma, but as much as college football just completely shifts anymore, the way that it changes, you never know when this will ever happen again. So take it in, just savor it, because just recognize that there's a first round college football playoff game in Norman, Oklahoma, underneath the lights on a Friday night. It really doesn't get any more special than this. It's going to be tomorrow night, so we've got a lot to jump into, and I hate that we got into it so late, and so apologies for this preview being up until basically the midnight hour, but we're going to get into it. December 19th at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at the Gaylord Family Oklahoma Memorial Stadium, the Palace on the Prairie in Norman, Oklahoma. A playoff game will be played, and it's in many ways, I guess in any game is kind of a historic matchup, but this is kind of a historic rematch where, Oklahoma, you really think of Oklahoma almost within one calendar year, almost. It's a little bit over a year now that Oklahoma has now beaten Alabama, kind of a heftier beatdown last year, and what felt like a huge win for Oklahoma because of the circumstances, everything falling in around it with senior day, a terrible season. Just felt like everything went wrong last season, so a lot of emotions went into that game, and it was a fun win. It was very fun, but it wasn't a big win. It didn't help. It didn't boost Oklahoma really in any regard. And now this season, the win against Alabama, not even arguably, it was much bigger of a win. Oklahoma ended up beating Alabama 23-21 just over a month ago. Let that sink in. Just a few days over a month. So that's another really cool thing, is that rematching about a month later, but that was back in Tuscaloosa. Now they're meeting on the Sooners' home turf in Norman. It's a huge one. I think the reason why this is kind of a historical matchup too is that if Oklahoma wins, they'll make history that no team has ever beaten Alabama twice in the same season. And that's really a crazy cool, a big defeat for really any team, especially a team as tough as Alabama and what they've been all season. This is a really good team. We're going to preview this game, and also it would be Oklahoma's first ever playoff game. Oklahoma's 0-4 in the playoffs, and it's annoying to see your team get there and just not be able to finish it out. So we're going to talk about it, get into it. I've got Chris Marler, who joined me earlier today, so it'll be a pre-recorded interview that I had with Chris Marler, and was able to dive into this game and just kind of a little bit more about Alabama and get his perspective. He's an Alabama guy, covers South Carolina and LSU and just kind of all over the place, but big-time SEC guy. I always love having Chris on to join me, but we're going to dive into that and so much more. Before we get too far into it, make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and as always, if you want to help support the channel just a little bit further, we're trying to pump out content for Oklahoma fans and keep on growing and offer more and build a community here. So consider becoming a member today. You can become a member for as low as $2.99 a month. Really cheap, just something just to kind of give back and show it a little bit of appreciation. So you can just click join down below, click the link in the description. We've also got merch if you want to check out our merch. Merch is another way to help support not just the show, but even just the Voice of College Football Network itself. You can find that merch. Also, should be a link down in the description below. That's at vocfb.com/shop. You can support the channel and the entire network. Get yourself a piece of merchandise to support the show. We've got hats, tumblers, T-shirts, sweatshirts, so much more. So go check it out. We appreciate everybody so much. But just hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button, that is the free and easy way to help support us here on the channel. We appreciate everybody, but we're going to dive into it, preview this matchup. First, let's go ahead and play. It's a recorded interview, and so we'll get back to the action after this interview with Chris Marler. All right, Oklahoma fans and Alabama fans, welcome in. I've got a very special guest. I've got Chris Marler in with me. Chris, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, man. It'll be God, we're about what? Let's see, I'm not great at math. 26 hours or 28 hours away?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I mean, very close. So it's an exciting time, I think, for really either team, and a little bit more so, I'd say, for Oklahoma because it feels like it's been an eternity since they've
Yeah.
been there. And then if I think for Oklahoma too, you kind of have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder wanting the first playoff victory, because they've been there several times, I think 4 times in the past, but
Oh, yeah.
haven't been able to win one in the playoffs.
I did not think about that because there was that whole there was that stretch from like the late 2010s where they were in it every year, but then came up short a little bit with some of like those Heisman winners and stuff. But I mean,
Yeah.
much different Oklahoma team. I tell you what, the one I've seen Oklahoma in the playoff live twice, and I will tell you that this defense would not give up 45 to Alabama in 2018, and they will not give up whatever, like the 150 that LSU scored in 2019. I think it's
Yeah.
a much different team.
Well, and even the shootout in the Rose Bowl against Georgia, another
Yeah,
one where it's like, man, if you just have slightly better defense, what can this team do?
yeah,
I think the defense is the big thing for Oklahoma that they've been leaning on. Obviously, it's been the thing that the fans have just been really excited about. But of course, that offense, I'm sure we'll get to it. But I want to start off with Alabama,
hmm
because there's been a lot of controversy, I guess, more leading into the playoffs. But does Alabama actually deserve to be in the playoffs?
I'm almost offended that you're even asking the question. And if I didn't like
I'm
you as
sure
a
I'll agree
person,
with you in your answer too. So if that makes you feel any better.
here's the thing: you can sit here and say they don't deserve to make the playoff. I think you look at Oklahoma; they're 10-2 with a win against Alabama being the reason why they're in the playoff,
Hmm.
right? Like, it is very hard for me to sit here and say, like, Georgia is they got to buy because they dismantled Alabama in the SEC championship game, and I look at the way that everyone talks about Alabama, and I don't feel like I'm being a homer when I say this. I think it's very true and has been for quite some time, and you can disagree all you want. But I think if you objectively look at just the facts that surround it, I think it's a pretty true statement, and that is that we judge Bama based off of a different grading scale than we do most teams. Notre Dame deserved to be in the playoff this year.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that Alabama didn't deserve to be in the playoff. Alabama had the best win of anybody in the country, arguably all season, but especially up until championship weekend when they went on the road to Georgia, a place that Georgia had lost one time in the last 8 years and beat them on their home turf in that stadium. Reeled off 3 other wins in a row against teams that were ranked at the time. The resume was all there for Alabama. Now they got absolutely gutted in the SEC championship game. I was. It's hard to beat a team twice. I didn't love the matchup from jump because Georgia is a very very good team, especially when you're kind of playing one dimensional offense for Alabama and you're playing against a team that you've already beaten once, down 5 starters. That's not making an excuse for what happened because I don't think those 5 starters were going to make up for the 21 points. I do think that Alabama absolutely deserves to be in. And I guess the last thing I'll say too is the idea that they didn't, and the talk around them how they looked worse and worse as the season went on. It's like they were down going into the Auburn game in Georgia. They were down about 5 starters. They played that game against Georgia with a third and fourth string running back, and there was a clear huge drop off when it came to that game. Josh Cuevas, who was the best offensive player they had besides Ty Simpson last time they played Oklahoma, he's been out since that Oklahoma game. Again, those don't make up the differences. I think the 21 points they lost to Georgia. I will say the fact that the Auburn game has been used against them is hysterical to me because we spend all offseason talking about all like how Jordan Hare deserves to be talked about as one of the best and most ferocious and feared, nighttime and road environments in the country. And it's like I've had to answer this question repeatedly this week on radio, which is like, do you think that loss to Auburn, did they deserve to win, or was that a really bad win? And it's like, dude, Auburn lost 7 games this year. They weren't a great team. They lost 6 of those 7 games by 7 points or less. Everyone struggled against Auburn this year, especially on the road. So to be very long-winded about it, I think that Alabama absolutely deserved to be in. That doesn't mean that I don't think Notre Dame didn't deserve to be in. But I will also say with that, the program that has had more privilege than anyone else in the history of this sport, that doesn't have to join a conference, that doesn't have to play the same amount of P10 or P4 games against conference opponents every single year, that gets to go on a streak like last year where they made the playoff and didn't play a true road game from week 3 to week 14 because they were able to play neutral sites and military institutes at Major League Baseball stadiums. I'm sorry it didn't work out for you this way. For once in the history of your program, I hate that it didn't work out for Notre Dame.
They played really well against Stanford, though. So I think, that has to – no. Well, I
Rivalry
think
game, bro.
I think the silly argument against Alabama is that, well, Alabama didn't get punished, but, I've seen that Ohio State got punished. No, they didn't. They swapped places with the team that beat them. That was no punishment. BYU got punished. No, they didn't. They dropped in a ranking that really didn't matter because they weren't going to make it in regardless. I think when you look at the grand scheme of thing, no, I'm kind of split where I don't think a conference game should go against you. But then again, in Alabama's instance, then I feel like, yeah, maybe they should have moved down in the rankings.
1,000% should have moved down. 1,000% should have moved down.
But then aren't we really just arguing? I think that the focal point comes in on Alabama because the committee was really faced with a tough decision. They deserve to be in the playoffs, but we can't bump them out of the playoffs. And if we move them down, then we're going to. Really, the problem was that, first of all, the ACC screwed up with whatever their tiebreaker system is. And then second of all, you have these auto bid systems where you allow group of 5 teams in because honestly, if we're really going to talk about it, I mean, okay, let's say that we move Alabama down to 11 or 12 and then we just kick the 2 group of 5 teams out. Everybody's happy. And I don't think anybody's really going to argue too much about the number 13 or 14 team in the nation. No. But instead we have a number 20 and number 24 team making the 12-team playoff.
I think, that's where the one thing I'll say I think you're wrong about is that no matter where they go to with this, you're going to have people who are at 13 and 14, because then it would have been, as an Oklahoma guy, Texas would have been as loud as possible about
their point is basically moot, right?
I completely agree, but they would have been complaining about it. And then Vanderbilt would have been the same thing, and I think Vanderbilt would have had a pretty decent leg to stand on. But I think that no matter where they move it, you're going to have people that are going to complain. It was hysterical to watch the ire that came towards Bama because it was like, I do think they should have dropped. I thought the team that had the most reason to complain was Georgia because they just finished the SEC at 12-1, played 5 games against ranked opponents, won 4 of them, and beat the crap out of Texas, beat the crap out of Alabama to close the season, beat Ole Miss. I mean, they had 3 wins over CFP teams. We watched Ohio State skate through the season like every Big Ten, like most every Big Ten team has done to get in the playoff over the past several years, which is you might have a tough game in the middle of the year against a ranked opponent. You might have another one in November, but other than that, it's going to be pretty simple to get there. And them dropping 1 spot, losing to Indiana, I thought was a joke. And it's like 3 of the top 5 teams were from the Big Ten, and we're still crying about this perceived SEC bias, which I think is just absurd. So I think the other thing too is I get how the system is set up this year, but also you're talking about having a Tulane team get in as the highest G5 school and playing in a rematch of something we've already seen. And it wasn't close then. So that part sucks too.
Yeah, absolutely. But I know that you kind of face a lot of that on social media and such. So I figured
I hope Notre Dame fans are listening to this. And I want all of them to hear this too. No one feels bad for you. No one feels bad. You haven't won a national championship in almost 40 years. You don't belong to a conference. Maybe this is the kind of – I tell you what, the most – I hate in what's happening in college football more than anything right now, and this is the last thing I'll say on the soapbox. What's happening in college football more than anything that really bothers me is we've been gaslit into believing all this bias towards the SEC. Kurt Cignetti brought it up at Media Days when he made that offhand comment about SEC scheduling, knowing full well that his team doesn't play a non-conference game for the next 5 years that's against a Power 4 opponent, that's away from home, and they also have 5 games against FCS opponents in that non-con schedule. But you're allowed to just say whatever, and there's no repercussions for it. Notre Dame sat there and talked about all this atrocity that happened to them and how unfair it is and they're going to have revenge next year. when you look at their schedule next year, they have 4 of their 12 games are against teams that finished this year with a winning record for one. But all the while, they're crying about this from their AD down to their fans. They have a thing in place for next year that says, hey, no matter what, as long as you win 10 games, you're in the playoff. Don't worry about it. And that is absurd that we are like allowing them to just have this like rolled out red carpet for them to do whatever they want in the world of college football.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. Do you think I feel like I feel some of this on the Oklahoma side? Is there some frustration about this matchup that it is Oklahoma versus Alabama being a rematch, just in the sense that really we've got to play again, not even necessarily complaining about the opponent,
Yeah.
just the fact that you're playing the same opponent again rather than getting somebody new, because I feel like that's kind of what the playoffs or even just bowl games are all about, is getting to play somebody new and moving on from your
Yeah.
season.
I would have loved to play anybody but Oklahoma in the first round. I think what's scary too about the Notre Dame thing is that if they would have put Notre Dame and Miami in, then you would have had 3 of the first round games, 3 of the 4 be games against that we've already seen, right? Like
Yeah.
that we like just like rematch of things we've already seen. So that would have sucked as well. I think I understand the frustration for Oklahoma. I do get the feeling that this there's few fan bases, even Ole Miss, that feel like they're as pumped for what's going to happen this weekend than Oklahoma. Like it's a great blue blood program. It's an awesome fan base, and it's a home crowd and a home field advantage. I didn't realize this until watching some of the games this year. I didn't realize how close y'all were to the fans or the stands. Or I'm sorry, I didn't realize how close the fans in the stands were to the field. I mean, they were
Yeah.
like in the back pocket of some of
Yeah.
these coaches. So I get the frustration. I think if you're Oklahoma, if you get by this one, man, I think that they can win. They can win the next 2 games and get to the national championship.
Yeah, I agree with you, and that's definitely something I'm hoping to be able to look forward to and talk about. But let's go back to the first game of Oklahoma Alabama this season real quick. How much do you think that game really tells us about this current game going into the playoffs?
That's a good question. I don't know how much it tells us. I do know it's been the main talking point for a lot of people, especially including
Yeah,
me. And for reasons that I want my narrative to be right in this time around, because I think going into that game, I remember saying, listen, here's I'm a big track record guy. And by the way, we can do an extra 5. I pushed the other show back to 3:15.
okay.
Probably could have texted you that, but either way. So I think I looked at this team going into it. I'm a big track record person. I'm saying, like, okay, listen. Well, John Mateer has not proven that he can't turn the ball over in most games they've played this year. I think they had a turnover in 7 of the 9 games coming in. They had multiple turnovers in 4 of those 7, and they didn't win the turnover battle. I think in 7 of the 9 as well. And you were going up against an Alabama team that was plus 11 at the time in turnover margin, hadn't lost a turnover battle in any game they played. And for you to say, hey, they're going to lose a turnover battle against a very good defense, I could have seen a strip sack coming. I could have seen an interception coming. Oklahoma plays the most physical brand of pass coverage of any team in the country. I would have believed all that. -3 would have been a hard sell for me. But if you told me they had 3 turnovers, 2 of them inside their 30-yard line, and missed a 36-yard field goal, I would have believed the field goal part for sure, but I would have assumed that score would have been a lot different than just 2 points. So I think there's a lot to learn from both. I think the biggest thing from Bama is they're going to try to look at that first game and mimic some things they did that worked. I think what Oklahoma's going to do is show some wrinkles on offense that they haven't shown in a while, because I think Mateer's probably the healthiest he's been since September. And I think the other thing they're going to do, and probably would do a better job of anyone else in the country, is try to find ways to mimic and mirror what Kirby Smart and Georgia did to Alabama in Atlanta.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you kind of talk a little bit about the defense too. Going over to the defensive side of the ball for Oklahoma, I think the most impressive group is that defensive front.
Yeah.
You look now going to have R. Mason Thomas in the game, and also Jaden Jackson, who I believe went out in the game against Alabama, if I'm remembering that correctly. So they're now going against really even a tougher and full strength defensive front.
Right.
How much do you think that leans into it? Because this is also a pass rush that is probably one of the best, if not the best, in the nation. How much do you think that really plays a critical part for Oklahoma and for Alabama, being able to both get that pass rush going, and then for Alabama being able to stop it?
I mean, it's huge for a number of reasons. I think it's really, really big because for Bama, you've struggled on the offensive line for most of the year. You cannot run the football. Like they had success running against Oklahoma the first game, which was shocking to me. Side note, I think one of the best bets in this game is Bama under 80 rushing yards, because I don't see them having that same type of success in this game. I think that if you win this game, you're going to have Ty Simpson drop back at least 40 times. And I think if you do that, you have seen him get happy feet as of late, and especially when they put pressure on him. And it was something that in the first game of the season, he was like 3 of 14 against Florida State when he was facing a blitz. And then he kind of got better at it. And then something happened in that Missouri game where things just kind of turned. You saw it against South Carolina. You saw it at times even against Tennessee, definitely LSU, and then obviously against Oklahoma. This Bama offensive line has given up at least 3 sacks in each of their last 3 games against SEC opponents and Power 4 opponents. The one that had the most, to the surprise of no one, is Oklahoma. They had 4, and they did it without arguably the best pass rusher in the entire conference. Cassius Howell's great. This kid, R. Mason Thomas, is just a different specimen.
Yeah.
And so I don't worry as much about him wrecking the game for 60 straight minutes. I worry about sliding protection over towards him, and then watching these exotic blitzes that Brent Venables will probably bring again, just like he did in the first game, and where Ty Simpson's seeing the different windows and changing like his viewpoints up from like the pre-snap to after the snap as well.
Well, and I kind of want to back up to the Alabama-Georgia game too for a second, because
hopefully the first one.
Well, yeah. No, let's go to the SEC championship game, just because I want to kind of zone in on something that I think is really important for today's game of college football. I think that was a perfect example, and especially let's say that the scenario were to play out where Oklahoma beats Alabama, and it feels very evident in this game that injuries were a part of it, or maybe not even necessarily injuries, but just fatigue. Does that then start the conversation of let's get rid of the conference championship games? Because I really feel like Georgia, they were extremely aggressive in that championship game, where Georgia being able to win kind of gets the better end of that, because they get a longer time of rest now to kind of heal up from that game.
I mean, Georgia is a really good team and doesn't need a lot of. I mean, they won't allow themselves any excuses, and I don't think there are any to be made for them this year, because they've excelled in everything they've done except for a 3-point loss at home to Bama. I hope it doesn't mean you're getting rid of the SEC championship game, because the SEC championship game to me has always been one of the best events of the calendar for college football every single year. It's so much fun. I mean, I'm from Atlanta. I remember the first one, watching it probably before you were born in '92, and it was awesome. And it was like it's been so many times where the winner of that game has become the national champion. And so I don't want to see that go away. I hate to give Big Ten brass credit for almost anything. I will tell you that Tony Petitti, the best idea I've heard from any Big Ten commissioner, and maybe any commissioner at all over the past several years, is what if you turn that conference championship weekend into a play-in, like a true play-in for the college football playoff. I'm very anti-opposed to automatic bids. I don't think you saw it this year. I think with like the automatic bids that you forced, you saw it last year with the automatic bids you forced, with Clemson being the lowest ranked team, and they get in because they beat an SMU team on a walk-off field goal. And it's like an SMU team that, I mean, you think about how bad that how many teams of last year in the playoff didn't even have a ranked win on their schedule. If you go 1 versus 2 plays for the SEC championship, I'm watching that. If you have a 3-day weekend in Atlanta where 3 plays 6 and 4 plays 5, and the winner of those 2 games also gets in, as well as the 1 and 2 seed, that's pretty must-see TV to me. Like, that sounds awesome. I don't know how you carry that out, but I would be open to watching that for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. I think just the nostalgia behind conference games. Whenever Oklahoma was in the Big 12, I hated when they went away from those games. And I definitely, and it was a huge thing whenever they brought that back, especially for Oklahoma, because they got to see their Oklahoma go in and dominate that most years. But I definitely feel you there. But I can definitely see the argument, unless, like you mentioned, like kind of making that some sort of play-in for the playoffs. I can see the argument to just get rid of them, because for one, there really isn't much of a gain. And if Alabama would have lost, or if they would have been kicked out of the playoffs this year, then you definitely would have seen more of a case of, yeah, maybe we just don't play these things anymore.
Well, let me give you a better scenario than that, because I don't think that they should have been punished for losing that game. And here's the thing too, BYU fans, it was so wild to me, the lack of like rational conversation around it, because I think BYU is really good. I think when you look at the resumes side by side and you go off of all the metrics that we've been talking about forever, which is strength of schedule, record, wins versus ranked opponents, and then your either common opponents or opponent win percentage. No one had a better resume than Oklahoma. I saw a Notre Dame fan say some crap the other day, and I about lost my mind on Twitter, because he was like, "Don't even get me started on Oklahoma not being able to deserve to
Yeah.
be in." It's like they beat everyone. Like they couldn't have had the one game they lost to that wasn't to a playoff team. Batir was like half of himself, and so I think that the thing that I look at when you talk about the best argument against it, BYU had already lost to that team and lost badly to that team and lost badly to him again. That's why they got punished, not because they lost by a similar amount than Alabama. Again, Nicole Auerbach, we're arguing about Alabama in ways that are different than you're using arguments for other teams. But the biggest thing too is, you heard it as much as I did before that game. If Alabama wins, where were they going to be seated? Because I didn't hear anybody talk about if Alabama was going to win that game. But if they were going to win, where would they have jumped to in the seating?
I think they should have been in the top four.
I don't think they would have been, though.
I don't think they would have been, but I just feel like SEC champion outright. I mean, if you're not in the top four, I would say SEC and Big Ten. I'll throw Big Ten in there as
Agreed.
well. If you're one of those two, and then Texas Tech this year absolutely deserved to be in the top
Yeah,
four.
I completely agree with everything you just said. I don't think they would have jumped them up there. They dropped them 6 spots when they lost to a playoff team by 2 points at home.
Yeah.
And so that for me was like, when I look at the actual advantage, and I'll specifically look through it through crimson and white, not crimson and cream, but crimson and white glasses, and say, if Bama wins that game, what is the upsell? Like what is the awesome reward that they were going to get if they won that game? They got to play JMU. Okay, you still got to play again. You're playing in the first round. Maybe you get a home game. Like, that's not enough of a sell for me to go beat Georgia twice in a year and have it be worth it.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, because I know you're short on time. Give us a real quick, just overall prediction how you see this game going out between Oklahoma, Alabama, playoffs, first round of the playoffs. I know Oklahoma's had Alabama's number for really most of history, but here recently.
Okay, rude.
But like I think that this is just a totally different game. And personally, I think this could be a game that Alabama. The biggest thing that worries me about this game is Alabama wants revenge.
Yeah.
And when you see a team that comes in there with nothing to lose and everything to gain to keep on moving forward with a little bit of revenge, it can always turn out to be an ugly one.
I did not think they were going to beat Georgia. I didn't think they were going to beat Oklahoma soundly in the first game. I thought they were going to win. I didn't think they would have 3 turnovers in the missed field goal.
Yeah.
Here's what I'll say, and I'm trying to be as objective as possible, and just so everyone's aware, I like to live in a place with Alabama where I emotionally hedge and say there's no way they're going to win this game, and there's no chance that they can, and blah blah. And by all means, I will be cheering for them on Saturday. Oklahoma's a great team. They have the best kicker in the country by far. Did he win the Lou Groza?
Yeah. First ever Oklahoma Sooner to win it.
He should have won it twice.
He should have gotten like 3 awards for it, just because why not?
He was awesome. He is awesome. The defense is incredible. Brent Venables, incredible job this year. A guy that I thought going up against that schedule was going to really, really struggle in year 2. I was not sold on Mateer coming in against SEC competition. He's been awesome. The defense has been one of the best defenses in the country. I think arguably the best defense in the country. They don't force a ton of turnovers, which sounds stupid coming from the Bama guy after what they did to Bama last time. I think they're great. I think they have the highest ceiling of any team in this playoff, because the ceiling of this team goes with how great John Mateer can play, and he's probably their best player, at least offensively, and one of the most talented players of anyone in the entire playoff. If they have September Mateer, they can win a national championship, because that defense is going to travel to anyone they play. And I guarantee you, Texas Tech, Oregon, Indiana, none of them have seen a defense like the one that Brent Venables has in Norman, Oklahoma this year. I say all that to also say, if they get by Alabama, I think they can get to the college football playoff, and I will adamantly cheer for them that they do. It's hard to beat a team twice. I look at this game and I think about what stands out the most to me in the difference maker, and it was Alabama playing pretty uncharacteristically against Oklahoma and how many times they turned the ball over, where they turned the ball over on the field, and all that kind of stuff. Ty Simpson played a very good game. They were able to run the football, and they were able to do things against this defense that they had done to a lot of other good teams all year. One of the key pieces on that was Josh Cuevas, not just from a pass catching ability, but also being able to being an extra blocker. I think all that's key. He'll be back for this game. I think it's going to be a very ugly game. I think it's gonna be Iowa, Nebraska, but just with different color uniforms. It's gonna be 17-9 or 17-30. It's gonna be gross. I just have a hard time believing, with everyone doubting Alabama, that they're gonna go on the road and not look much different than they did against Georgia. And I love when people doubt Alabama. I think they're gonna get a win on Friday. I would not be surprised if they lose. And I don't want Oklahoma fans coming after me because I am very, very impressed. I think this is a great, great team. It's a great fan base, ton of tradition there. Cannot wait to see what that stadium looks like on Friday night.
Yeah.
But I think Alabama's going to win this game 17-13.
Yeah, I think you feel this about the same way about this game, just on the other perspective, where I really feel like everything kind of draws up where I feel like Alabama really could come into this thing and win decisively. And I think they could. I think they could win. It's going to be a gutty match, no doubt. I don't think it's going to turn into like a 34-17 game or nothing like that. But I just think they can come in there and have the stats that they had the last game, and still come out with maybe a touchdown win or something, and come out of that thing. And us looking at Alabama saying, hey, this really could be the Alabama that we saw from week 2 to week 10 or whatever it was. So I really think that you could see that from Alabama. But then again, like you mentioned, it's also hard not to look over at Oklahoma's defense, getting the rest, getting R. Mason Thomas and Jaden Jackson back full healthy. And you get all of this leading into the game, the first ever playoff game in Norman, the atmosphere, the home environment. There's a lot that goes into it that I really don't blame anyone for picking either side. It truly is a pick 'em. So it's
I tell you what, it's an incredible job by Brent Venables, win or lose. And if he wins, he deserves even more praise, obviously. But what a season for this team to come in, and they could have packed it up after the loss to Texas or Ole Miss with what was in front of them. And I think you look at this team and they're fortunate in a way where you like Alabama's talked about like, well, man, they looked horrible coming down the stretch and how they beat Auburn, and you look at how Oklahoma beat LSU. But the bottom line from both those teams is that they won. And they were able to get here. And I think Oklahoma's in a much better spot. I kind of get the frustration now that you bring it up about them having to play Bama again, because you're only 1 seed higher than them. So, like, what were you rewarded? A rematch, but you get to be at home. That kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Going 10-2 with that schedule and what they did was like, I think it's more impressive than any year they've arguably had, I think, in the last 10. Maybe not statistics-wise. But again, man, if Mateer can be September Mateer, there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to have a very difficult time playing against this defense.
Yeah, and there was even a quote too that kind of goes along with that from one of the players. I forget who it was, but he just said the last 4 games felt like a playoff for us. We were if we lost one more, we were out anyways. But Chris, I appreciate you so much for jumping on, joining me. I guess let everybody know where they can find your stuff real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Vern_Funquist on Twitter and social and stuff like that. And then Locked On Gamecocks, which is fun. It's my other team that I get to talk about on a daily basis. Fourth and Wrong podcast, and then LouisianaSports.net and ESPN 104.5 here in Baton Rouge. So,
all right, appreciate it.
Appreciate it, brother.
All right, that was Chris Marler, and yes, our names are very close to each other. We always tease each other about that, but they're not the same. All right, Chris Marler, Josh Mahler. Anyways, no, I really appreciate him jumping on, just kind of giving a little bit of an insight from the Alabama perspective. He's an Alabama guy. He's an Alabama fan, but he covers all kinds of SEC. Love Chris Marler. Appreciate him for jumping on. But let's get into the Oklahoma perspective of what this matchup means. Obviously, being playoff game in Norman, man, I'm so ready for this game. I've been ready for this game for 3 weeks, even though it's only been like 2 weeks. But I really have, and I think a lot of Oklahoma fans were once you had that sniff, that smell, the taste of it in the water that Oklahoma could be hosting a playoff game. We were ready for it. We were ready to see it. Of course, looking back to the last game that happened for Alabama and Oklahoma, Oklahoma got the better of the two. And I know that this has been a huge talking point, but I want to talk about the last game in a different light. So first game, Oklahoma 23, Alabama 21. The turnover margin was the big decisive measure in this game, with the 3 turnovers, one being a pick six, and of course another one being a fumble on the punt return that gave Oklahoma down in Alabama territory. So, I mean, there was so much with those turnovers that really helped Oklahoma. And I was listening to Josh Pate, and he made this very clear, because I think a lot of people try to talk about Oklahoma's turnovers in that game as just a randomized stat. And I like the way that Josh Pate puts it, because he said it's something along the lines of, yeah, it's a randomized stat and many times, but all of those turnovers were extremely forced. And then there was other moments in that game where Oklahoma could have forced another turnover. So, I think when you look at that game and how Oklahoma forced the turnovers, it was very intentional. And whenever it happens at such a high rate, the way that Oklahoma has done it in the last 4 or 5 games, it's an intentional thing, and it becomes a trait of that team, and that's huge. But anyways, Oklahoma was completely outgained in that matchup, and that's one thing that a lot of talking heads are talking about, how much Alabama outgained Oklahoma in that first matchup, 406 to 212 total yards, and they use that as if Oklahoma's offense was trash in that game. But here's the real story behind it, and again, another thing that Josh Pate actually brought up that kind of brought that light to inside my head that I really wasn't thinking about in that game. I think we talked about it a little bit actually after that game, but Oklahoma started in Alabama territory so much during that game. I think there was 4 or 5 times where Oklahoma started in Alabama territory. Alabama rarely started outside of their own 25. So it was a field position game where Oklahoma really had that field tilted against Alabama the entire game, and a big part of that was special teams, and then the defense being able to help the offense and getting better field positions. So I look at what Oklahoma did, and it was much different than what the stats show. That's why you can't just look at the stats and draw up your conclusion about what that game was. And I think that's what a lot of talking heads do. They see that scale kind of tilting one way in the total yards, and they don't really pay attention to the fact that has nothing to do with what Oklahoma really did in that game. It wasn't luck, it wasn't fluky, it wasn't any of those things. It was Oklahoma doing what Oklahoma knows that they have to do in order to win games, and that's force turnovers, be aggressive on defense, play well in special teams. Isaiah Satania also deserving of mention in that game for his huge, not able to get much in the receiving yards, but he was able to get that huge punt return, 40-some-yard punt return, I believe it was, to set Oklahoma up for a field goal and a crucial moment in that game. So, and then not only that, but I think Oklahoma's offense, the identity of this offense here as of late, especially in the last 4 or 5 games, has been just do enough to not screw the game up, and then also just finding ways to get those big plays when you really need them the most. Find Isaiah Satania on a slant or a drag route and get him across and just let him use kick on the burners and beat everyone out. That's been a huge part for Oklahoma. And then even looking at Deion Burks and the LSU game, just finding a way to get that big play when you really need it the most. It's just kind of what Oklahoma is known to do. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about that because I don't really think that the last game is going to bleed into this game at all. Okay, I think the talking points of, well, we saw what this matchup looked like before, and Alabama outgained them, and so if Alabama just cuts out the turnovers, they win this second rematch. I don't think that you look at that last game and make the comparison into this new game. Because here's a few things how Alabama has really changed. So they kind of enter having a little bit of adjustments. They got a little bit healthier, according to the injury reports and the availability reports that have been given. But nearly 13 players were out or even limited in the SEC championship game against Georgia, where they lost 28-7. And a lot of those key players are returning to the field, or they're going to be coming back. You get running back Jam Miller, who's expected to start. There's a few other guys that should be out there, but you look at what Alabama has done with the ups and downs really throughout their season, and coming towards the back end of the season, I just have a really hard time believing that Alabama is going to just turn their season around and become the team that we saw towards the beginning of the season. If you exclude the FSU loss, from week 2 to 10 or whatever that was when they played Oklahoma, really. And so the same with Oklahoma. I don't really think you're going to see. I do think that there are some things that you could see from the offense that they really let it fly, and they really find some rhythm in certain aspects of the game that they haven't seen in the last several weeks. But I don't think you're going to see a completely different team. I don't think you're going to see Oklahoma put up 500 yards on offense or anything like that. None of that. And the same thing with Alabama. I don't think you're going to see a different Alabama that just comes out, oh my gosh, this is the Alabama from earlier on in the season. It could happen. I just don't think that would happen because they don't have that kind of rhythm. They haven't gotten themselves to that point through how many games. So why would we expect it to change all of a sudden just because it's a playoff game? Now you could say, well, because it's a playoff game, there's more on the line. There's more at stake. They have that revenge factor. I think the biggest concern, and I think I brought this up with Chris whenever we were talking, is that the biggest concern for me is the revenge factor for Alabama. They don't like the fact that the last time that many of the same players, when they played in Norman a season ago, they got dominated, and they hate that. And they also don't like the fact that Oklahoma marched into their home stadium and handed them a loss that kind of put them on the edge of the college football playoffs, if we're being honest. And so they really have that revenge factor. And so that's one thing that I think is a little concerning. It's concerning because that is a real factor in the sport of college football. But let's start off with Oklahoma's strengths, some of their keys to victory. First off, you can't mention this team without two things: defensive dominance and really the special teams excellence. Those two things for Oklahoma is what has gotten them to this point. Those two things are what have won the 10 games for them, really. I think, of course, you could probably exclude 2 or 3 of those, maybe the Kent State or the Illinois State game or the Temple game. You could probably exclude at least special teams out of those 3 wins, but out of the other 7 that they won, that was what won those games for Oklahoma. Starting off with the defense, national leaders in almost 3.5 sacks per game, and tackles for loss, nearly 10 tackles for loss at 9.6. They ranked number 3 in touchdowns allowed, only allowed 16 touchdowns on the season. Number 7 in scoring defense at 13.9 points per game. And it's really been a lot of ways for Oklahoma's defense. It's been much of a bend but don't break type of defense many times. I think against Alabama was very clear that that's kind of how they played. I think they played not so much in I feel like really Alabama was the biggest one. I think they kind of played that way against Ole Miss. It just didn't really play out the way that they would have intended for it to play out. So I think overall this has just been an incredible defense that, again, if you look at the stats, really doesn't tell you everything that's there for this defense. I think if you look at individual stats, it just shows how impressive every single player was, that they all got such a high rotation count that so many players were able to rack up so many different stats and kind of spread those stats around, even on the deep end of that depth chart. I think that's so impressive with this team, and especially on this defense. With R. Mason Thomas coming back in, he'll be there. Jaden Jackson full strength and feeling healthy again and feeling really good. And honestly, we'll talk about the offense in just a second, but I don't want to jump ahead of myself. We'll talk about the defense right now. But yeah, I think you get some pieces with all this rest that they've gotten, and I know it's not been just lay back on the couch and completely rest for these last couple weeks, week and a half, whatever it's been. It's been practicing, but you've had a lot more time for rest and rehab and getting your body right for this game. And let's be honest too. I think another part about this game that really matters when you're bringing it to this stage is that you don't have the same concerns of be careful and don't get yourself don't go all out and get yourself injured because we need you in 7 days. I think it's a 9-day rest. Correct me if I'm wrong, 9 or 10 days. And so this is all or nothing. You put everything on the line. There is no take it easy and hey, just be careful about this. No, you put everything on the line. And that's the mentality of the team. Obviously, you don't want anybody to get hurt because you want them for the next game, but you do play with a much different mindset than you do in week 3 or 4, 5, 6, because you've got so much more left. You've got 4 games left. Okay, you've got 4 games. That's the way you look at this. And without this game, you don't have the other 3. And then, of course, going forward with that same process. Also talking about the special teams and how excellent they've been. Number 2 nationally in special teams efficiency. That's an incredible stat. And then, of course, Tate Sandell. Most consecutive makes in school history. He's 10 for 10 from 45-plus yards, 7 for 7 from 50-plus yards. The dude's just been absolutely dominant all season, absolutely deserving of all the recognition that he's gotten, the Lou Groza, all of that. And then, of course, Grayson Miller, too. First team SEC, I believe he was. And much deserving for him as well. 46.2 yards per punt, leads the SEC. And so, again, he is a huge part that if the offense doesn't get going, again, flipping that field and really tilting it in Oklahoma's favor, tilting it against Alabama or really whoever the opponent is. And Grayson Miller has been that guy. And what's crazy is before the season, they were talking about his inconsistencies and how they were kind of concerned about him. And he started off a little, he came into the season really, and he's been super consistent, and he's been super talented, and he's been a huge piece of this special teams. And so really incredible to see the progression that he's had. But then you go over to the offense. One of the most impressive things about this offense, Oklahoma's 32 for 32 in the red zone. 23 touchdowns, 9 field goals. So when they get in the red zone, more often than not, they're scoring a touchdown. At the very least, they're going to kick a field goal. And so that is so awesome. Of course, winning your last 4 games, getting that momentum with 5 wins against AP-ranked teams. It's been an incredible season for Oklahoma and all that momentum building up to this point. And I will mention something on the offensive side that I was trying to cut myself off before jumping ahead of myself a minute ago is on the offensive line, Jake Makula might not be playing. And personally, I look at that as, all right, because I actually think Oklahoma's best offensive line performance was against LSU with Febechi Wiwu up there at center. He played amazing for his first ever career start at center. I mean, I wish we would have found that earlier on in the season because this offense might have been able to find some sort of rhythm with that and work with it. I thought Oklahoma's offensive line looked so much better with him in there. And I think I heard Gabe Eichert, a clip of Gabe Eichert saying that very similar, how wonderful he thought he played whenever he jumped in at center. So, yeah, I really liked Febechi Wiwu playing at center, and I really hope that that's the case again in this game because if he's going to perform like that, man, just put the best guy in there. I don't care about the earned or, all of the higher class, none of that. I don't care about it. I don't care about what the depth chart was supposed to look like. I care about what it should look like based on the best players out there. And that's the way I feel with that offensive line. Let's go against some of the concerns against Alabama and where Alabama can get some opportunities. First, I think, you look, they need the defense to really step up and improve a little bit against Alabama because you do look at those stats from the last game where Alabama nearly doubled Oklahoma's stats, and that is concerning. I think you do need to improve some, but just playing your game, making sure that you don't think too much about those stats and just focus on the scoreboard because if you score, if your defense is holding them down and you win by 1 point, it doesn't matter. I will win these next 4 games by 1 point and lose the overall, if Oklahoma were to be dominated in the yardage on all 4 of these next 4 playoff games and win the national championship, only winning by 1 point in all 4 games, I don't care. And I know Brent Venables, and I know this coaching staff, this team, every single one of the players, they would take that. You're saying that we didn't perform well on the stat sheet, but we won the game? Okay, who cares? We get to hoist the trophy in the end. That's really what matters. And so I think just focusing on that. And then, of course, the offensive challenges with John Mateer. He's just over 2,500 yards, 12 touchdowns, but 10 interceptions through the air. So, I mean, the turnover management is extremely critical because you can't rely on the defense to get 3 turnovers and score a pick 6 the way that they did in the first game against Alabama. And so you have to be able to at least control your own destiny in the sense that you're not going to turn the ball over. So I do want to see this offense start to click and find some sort of rhythm, but I don't want them to get too ahead of themselves and start, throwing the ball around and trying to get too gutsy, because what you saw earlier on in the season was John Mateer looked like a better player and he was throwing the ball all over the field, but he also kind of got a little too greedy at times and got maybe a little too gung-ho at times and put the ball into harm's way. There was a few times where it was like, man, I don't know why he went there, but it worked, so we're just going to turn the other way. There was a few other times where it was like, what the heck are you thinking? And the defense dropped it, and we're lucky. There were other times where it was like, hey, probably shouldn't have gone there. And you just gave the ball to the other team. And of course, Oklahoma was able to overcome a lot of those circumstances, but you have got to help yourself in terms of turnovers. So you can't turn the ball over. You've got to get out fast the way that you did in the first game against Alabama too. You got to be able to score points on offense. That's a big thing. And I think not just relying on the special teams, because special teams will score points, okay? And I think that's probably the biggest thing. Get down inside the 30-yard line, just do that. Focus on that. And then focus on we've got to put points on the board. Because I think if you can get down inside the 30-yard line and get yourself 3 points every time, this is the type of game where field goals are going to win you games in this matchup. But you just can't rely on the defense and the special teams in every game in the playoffs. It's going to work up through this point, and it's going to work to an extent, but you can't rely solely on that. You've got to find some sort of rhythm on offense. Now, where Alabama can win, of course, is if they focus on the turnovers. They don't turn the ball over, because that was the difference maker in that last game. If they don't turn the ball over, then I think they're doing pretty well. And Ty Simpson only has 5 interceptions on the season. One of those to Oklahoma, and it was pick 6. But if they can just find a way to establish the run game in a way that, I don't expect them to. Here's the thing. Chris Marler even talked about it whenever we were talking earlier. And Alabama's not going to run the ball very well. They're not going to all of a sudden just find rhythm in the run game. But if you could just establish it enough to control the game to some extent and just make sure, just be smart with the ball, I guess, is really what I'm getting at. And I'm not saying run the ball either. I think run plays such as screen plays, quick bubble on the outside, just ways to kind of spread the field out. I think that's Alabama's biggest takeaway, the way that they can win. And then, of course, you've got to look at Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams. Ryan Williams really hasn't had a tremendous season. He's just had a quiet season. He's not bad. He's still one of their best players on the field, and so you've really got to focus in on them. If Alabama can get either of those guys going, and like I said, in those screens, bubbles, things like that on the outside, then and start to stretch the defense out, then you start to get a little concerned on the Oklahoma side, because that's how teams like Ole Miss were able to perform well. And even Alabama, when they were doing well, that's what they were doing really well against Oklahoma, was spreading things out, getting things, widening up that defense and creating gaps, and then finding one of those gaps to attack. And then looking at Alabama's defense, they're number 12 in scoring defense. Can they make enough stops and force Oklahoma's offense to maybe force them to create the turnovers that Alabama did in the first matchup? But here's where I think that this game is a little bit different. And it's going to, so this is a playoff game. This is everything on the line. It wasn't the first time around. And for Oklahoma, like I mentioned too, with I believe it was Owen Heineke that mentioned it, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you remember who that was. But he said, the last 4 games of the season felt like playoff game because each one of those, if we lose, we're not making it to the playoffs. We're not here if we lose any one of those last 4 games. So Oklahoma has played in this circumstance of your back is against the wall, you can't lose another matchup, where Alabama hasn't really been playing that way. Alabama's been playing to just try to win the next game, and they haven't played at the extent as Oklahoma right now. And so that's where I really lean towards Oklahoma. Now, the more that I really think about this game, so I'll give you my concern for Oklahoma. My concern for Oklahoma is the offense hasn't been very good. The offense really hasn't been able to find any sort of rhythm. And a lot of that feels like play calling. A lot of that feels like not getting rhythm because of certain things over on the offensive play calling side that really feel off to me. And that's just my dumb fan, couch coach, or couch quarterback perspective. But it really feels that way. And so I don't really expect a whole lot to change. I do think Oklahoma is going to try to wrinkle things up a little bit and throw some things at Alabama in the playoffs, really at any team in the playoffs that teams haven't seen all season. Of course, we know that Brent Venables is going to do what he can what he can do and what he does best. But on the offensive side of the ball, I am not really sure what they're going to do on offense. I'm not really sure how they're going to switch things up and really get into rhythm and just blow us away. That's what I'm most concerned about. But I think with the home environment, first of all, wear crimson, not black. Wear crimson. That's what the school put out. That's what Oklahoma football social media has put out. Wear crimson, okay? Don't listen to Red Dirt Media. I'm going to call them out. I like Red Dirt Media and everything that they do, but I'm just going to call them out. We're not doing the blackout, guys. We're not doing that, all right? So just, no, we're not doing it. I think it would have been a cool idea personally, but no, we're wearing crimson. So wear crimson, show out, and be loud. You have got to make that environment something different than it has ever been in the history of the Palace on the Prairie. You have got to make this environment one of the craziest environments that Alabama has ever seen in their life, because that is going to, it makes so much more of a difference today in college football because of the in-helmet communication. And so you have got to make it extremely loud, and you've got to do it before they as soon as a play is over, you've got to be loud right then, because that's when they're talking in their helmets right away, and that's when you need to be loudest. You need to disrupt all communication on the field. And man, I look at this. The thing that concerns me is Oklahoma's offense and the revenge factor. Alabama wants this really bad. And here's another thing. And I mentioned this when Oklahoma went against Texas. I said, I really don't like that they just lost against Florida, because that gives teams more of an incentive coming in. And then for Ole Miss, I really didn't like that Ole Miss lost to Georgia just before that. And it gives them a little bit more of an incentive coming into that game. And I'll say the same about Alabama, because those two, with Ole Miss against Georgia, they had that game in their grasp. They should have won that game. And for Texas, they should have never lost to Florida. And so both of those were pissed off that didn't go the way that it should have gone in our eyes. Alabama's in the same boat where maybe they shouldn't have necessarily beaten Georgia, but they definitely shouldn't have gotten manhandled the way that they did in the SEC championship game. And there's a lot of people counting them out, kind of that underdog mentality, that chip on their shoulder, that a lot of people were saying that they shouldn't be in the playoffs. Why didn't they get punished? All of that stuff. So that's the part that concerns me, is does that emotion and that ticked off bulldog, walking in there, and I don't mean to use bulldog in that, but I think that the revenge factor is scary for Oklahoma. But it can also be flipped. It could also be used in a way Oklahoma's got a big chip on their shoulder too. Oklahoma is being counted out all across the nation. I think even for the people that I've heard, even for the talking heads that I've heard kind of picking for Oklahoma, they still bring up the same old, the same talking point of, Oklahoma got dominated in that first matchup really in terms of yardage, and so they just got lucky with the turnovers. But Oklahoma's got a huge chip on their shoulder. They started off as an underdog in this game. Now they're a 1.5 point favorite, so now it's flipped over to Oklahoma, where they're the slight favorite in this game. I really feel good about Oklahoma, and the closer that we get to this matchup, the more that you really break down what these two teams bring to the table, and the more that the more you look at what these teams have done up to this point and what they've gone through to get to this point, I feel really good about Oklahoma. This defense is suffocating, and they are going to be stronger and better than ever, I believe, on Saturday. And so I really feel that the closer we get to game time, this really leans in Oklahoma's favor for many reasons. And, so I'm looking at this. I do think it's going to be a defensive battle. Like I said, I really don't think that the offense is just going to find something and that they're going to find some sort of rhythm all of a sudden where they hadn't found it in the last several weeks. They've had a lot of time to prep and to game plan and try new things. And so that might give them a little bit more momentum. Maybe they can do something on offense. I just feel like Oklahoma's coming into this thing and just wants it. The feeling that I get from this locker room is that they just really want this more than I have ever felt them want a game in the past. Over-under sitting right around 40.5. I really don't know what to do with that because I see two different scenarios. And I'll kind of give my score prediction. My official score prediction, I think Oklahoma 20, Alabama 16. I'll give them 16. I could also see this going just over with Oklahoma 24, Alabama 20, somewhere in that range. It's going to be a close battle. I think about a 4 or 5 point game. And it's really going to come down to the trenches. It's going to come down to Oklahoma's pass rush. When Ty Simpson is thrown off his rhythm, when he's pressured, the way that he was against Georgia, the way that he was against Oklahoma in that first matchup, the way that he was, in really any one of their losses, you see how he scrambles. He gets that happy feet. He gets out of his rhythm, and he really finds no confidence. I really think that Oklahoma can pull this one off. And man, what a huge victory, and what an amazing feeling that would be to finally get that off their back. But there's this weird sneaky suspicion that I have to like this weird gut feeling that Oklahoma just comes out and plays lights out on defense and gives you a similar outcome of what you saw a season ago. I mean, maybe like a 24-6. I really have something weird in my gut that all of a sudden Oklahoma just comes out and Alabama's like, what the heck just happened? Why? And it's regardless of how this game plays out, nothing will surprise me. I could see one team blow the other team out regardless of who blows out who, and then I could also see it come down to overtime or last-minute field goal, or I could see this game going so many different ways. I don't think it's going to be a shootout or anything like that. It would surprise me if this were to turn into like a 38-35 type of game. That would probably be the only thing. If either of these teams score in the 30s, that would surprise me. But man, this is going to be a very fun one. I'll jump over to the chat real quick, just because we didn't jump to the chat at all. First, starting off with Sooner Cowboys. What's up, man? He says, cannot go 0-5 in the college football playoffs. BV cannot go 0-4 in bowl games. Yikes. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I have no argument against that. Yeah, I mean, it's a really bad look for your program if you make it to the playoffs and you just keep on losing. I brought that up with Chris Marler. And, it's just, I don't know. I hate that feeling that that you've made it to the playoffs, but is that a bragging right? Is it a bragging right that you made it to the playoffs? No, I don't think so. I mean, to some extent, yeah, it's a bragging right before the fact. So like up to this point, right now, it's a bragging right that you made it to the playoffs. But after the game, if you end up losing the way that Oklahoma's lost the 4 times in the past, it just kind of goes out the window. I did hear John Hoover, and I meant to write this down too. John Hoover brought something up in one of the press conferences where he told Brent Venables that I believe it was 5-0 against teams in rematches post game. So whether it be in the playoffs or conference championship games. Now that's Brent Venables as a defensive coordinator. So like at Clemson is what he was referring to. But that was really impressive to me that Brent Venables obviously finds ways to adjust on defense to really change things up. But no, I totally agree with you. I think that this is it is such a must win for Oklahoma in many ways, like for so many reasons. For this year, because you want to move on. And if you move on, like Chris Marler and I talked about, I really think that Oklahoma has a really good chance moving forward through the playoffs. And then just for this program and what this program is all about, I think you really want to just be able to move past the whole 0-5 in the playoffs, all of that. And so, yeah, no doubt, This is a really big game. Goes without saying, this is huge for many reasons, and you can keep on stacking up those reasons. Let's see. Daughters Jean says this isn't a Riley Sooner team, and this isn't a Saban Tide team. No, it's not. It's a totally two different teams, and I think that's what makes this matchup so much more fun. Is that these two teams are two very special teams and very unique teams. And the matchup is really fun. Like I said, I do hate that going against Alabama again, because I mean, from one perspective, it is hard to beat a team twice. And so I hate it for that reason. But I also just don't like, I don't like the rematches. I don't like the Ole Miss Tulane rematch. I don't like this rematch. I really wish you could just kind of switch things up where you don't get a rematch, at least in the first round. But that's kind of where I'm at. Stacy says, hit the like button to see a football. I appreciate that. Yeah, hit the like button. And then, show me what that football looks like, because I like that. It is a cool little thing, too, if you hit it. I think that's based on what the I don't know how YouTube does it, but I think it's based on what you're watching, too, because I think it does it differently for different videos. But this one, it'll put up a football, apparently. So try it out and just hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button as well if you haven't already. Nicholas, he says, great conversation. I'm so ready for this game. Yeah, I think everyone is ready for the game. Man, it's going to be so exciting, so fun. John Adams, he says, RMT will have Ty running for his life tomorrow night. I sure hope so. I think this is a matchup, man. Like that's really what you need. You need to throw, because Ty Simpson is their offense. Without Ty Simpson, they can't run the ball. They're not going to be able to do anything. If you can get back there and disrupt him, that's exactly what Georgia did. And I do think that you look at that Georgia game as an example of how to beat Alabama. And I think Oklahoma game was very similar too, where you really get him out of rhythm. Mr. Dilligaff says, it was Taylor Wine that said that. He also said he is not a DJ. Yeah, absolutely. It was Taylor Wine. I couldn't remember who it was exactly, but I appreciate you for putting that in there, because it was bothering me. I'm not gonna lie. Chuck says they had 10 people out. I'm assuming you mean the SEC championship game. Yeah, I know they did, and that's a big part of it. That definitely plays a huge factor in that game, but it's still a huge. I mean, honestly, too, I don't know. It's a big part of it, but they still got dominated in that game. You've got to walk into it with a different mindset. This is going to be a different Alabama team too. This is why I don't think they're going to get blown out the way that they did against Georgia, because this Alabama team is a little bit more rested and ready for this game, where they weren't really in that SEC championship game. It also kind of feels like to me, it felt in many of the games, I think the Ohio State-Indiana game was really like the only conference game where it really felt like teams cared about winning a championship, about a conference championship. I don't know. I didn't really feel that energy. And even from Ohio State, I wasn't really sure that I felt that type of energy from them, like they really wanted to win a conference championship. And I think that's because of the change in the landscape of college football. I don't know. It kind of felt that way for Alabama in some regard. I'm not saying that they just walked in there and didn't care, that they didn't want to win. It just didn't feel like they had that same energy. But that might be a totally hot take too. I don't know. Modern Day Caveman says O-line needs to block better and open up the running lanes. Yeah, and I think Oklahoma needs to try to lean on a run game too. This is a defense that you can exploit by using that run game, and Oklahoma does have Javonte Barnes available, and it won't burn up his red shirt. So do you use Javonte Barnes a little bit and open it up? I want to talk a little bit about him. I think he deserves a spotlight because if he does end up playing, which I believe he will, if he gets any sort of play time, what an amazing thing from him if he does come into this game, because he's trying to save that red shirt, which he can still save it by playing in the playoffs, which I really like that rule. But there are other players, and I won't mention any names, that are also kind of doing the same thing that, hey, I mean, you could play in this game, or at least give an effort to play in this game, and it may not even matter to you. For Javonte Barnes, for example, I don't know if he's transferring or not. I don't know if he's just trying to save to try to build up towards next year. I don't know exactly. I know which way I lean in that thinking, but if he's not planning on being a Sooner in the future and he does end up playing in this game, it just shows how much he cares about this team, about this program, about being a Sooner. And so I really appreciate that personally. But yes, the O-line, Modern Day Caveman, does need to block better. And I think if you have that same O-line against that Oklahoma showed out against LSU, I really like it. Stacy says 24-21 Oklahoma. I like that prediction. I really like Chuck's prediction, and I really hope that's the one that I really hope that's the one. 21-7 OU. And like I said, too, that wouldn't shock me if one team or the other really blew the other out that way. Wouldn't shock me. And so, yeah, I hope you're right, Chuck. I also like what you said here. He says, first time in the playoffs, it's different. Yeah, you know what? It is the first time. So, you know what? First time, there is nothing before the 12-team playoff. We don't count the other ones. So we're 0-0 coming into this thing trying to be 1-0 in the playoffs. I like that mentality 100%. But anyways, we appreciate everybody so much for tuning in tonight. Make sure to follow us on social media, all that fun stuff. But just hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And then, of course, if you want to support the channel just a little bit further, you can become a member for as low as $2.99 a month. Also, go check out the merch store. That is vocfb.com/shop for all of our network merch shop, as well as Oklahoma VOCFB stuff, all that fun stuff. It helps support the channel and the network. So go check that out, vocfb.com/shop. Again, appreciate everybody so much for tuning in. Very excited for a huge playoff game in Norman, Oklahoma. Show out, wear crimson, and be loud. Go and make that environment one of the craziest that we've ever seen in the history of Oklahoma football. But anyways, let's get on to it. Less than 24 hours away. Looking forward to it. I know you are too. Let's get to